Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. This is the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thank you for being here. Thanks to those who've subscribed. Thanks to those who have referred others. That certainly helps us build a loyal base of listeners. If you were with me a couple days ago, I did a program on helping people who were involved with stress. And this is all stemming from a series of short articles that appeared in Psychology Today, the December 2020 issue of Psychology Today. And over time, I'm going to get these in. I have a lot of people to interview, and I need to release those, and I've got a lot of other topics I'm certainly going to be hitting on, but from time to time, I want to talk about these articles. Today, I'm going to talk about having a difficult conversation. And then tomorrow I've got an interview. I'm going to be releasing a program and an interview I did with Alyssa Carpenter, and she is the author of How to Listen and How to Be Heard: Inclusive Conversations at Work. We're going to be having a conversation about dealing with toxic people, and there is a segment in the Psychology Today on dealing with toxic people, but I had planned on having Alyssa on. I've have her book, and I've been planning on having her on anyway, and so I figured, you know what, rather than talking about what's in Psychology Today, I want to get it directly from Alyssa as to how do you deal with toxic people. But with respect to having a difficult conversation, and I think that's a whole lot different than dealing with toxic people. For me, you have difficult conversations with great people. Toxic people are people who really sort of have that issue that you need to be dealing with, and you need to be dealing with the person more so than it can be the topic, but it's really the person. With the toxic person, the conversation can be something pretty rudimentary, and you're still having to deal with them. With having a difficult conversation, you are likely dealing with a good person, or can be dealing with a good person, but the topic is a little bit difficult. So this particular article in Psychology Today was written by Dan Mager, and Dan is the executive director of the Vance Johnson Recovery Center, and he's the author of the book Some Assembly Required. And he's got a series of things in here. I really haven't counted them all, but there's a series of things, and we'll touch on pretty much all of these. But the first thing he points out is, as much as possible, stay at about the same eye level, which I thought was interesting. Never really considered that. I guess in the Zoom world, I think it still matters. But when you're talking person to person with somebody, you have to have a difficult conversation. If they're sitting, then you sit. If they're standing, then maybe you ought to stand as well, and try to be at as much as you can at eye level. And there's probably something to that, harkens back to our psychology and just how we're hardwired, but try to be on the same eye level. Speak in a calm tone as possible. And to a degree, this really kind of makes sense. I find that if people come at me with an angry tone, I can feel my body responding. I can just feel it. And some people, that's just their nature. They just like to bark at people, and it's not really there's really not an issue there, but that's how they are. And I try to communicate to those people, listen, when you have an angry tone, I feel an angry response. And so I think it's best that you, and Dan talks about this, just come at them with a calm tone. Even in emails, I find myself with emails, just trying to start the email off with kind of a friendly tone. And if I just respond in an email to what they're talking about, it comes off a little more terse, even though I might not intend that. So I always try and start off an email with a thank you or just kind of some sort of polite commentary, just to kind of set the tone. Third thing it talks about in the article, avoid finger pointing. It's not about blaming. It's about, it's about just solving a situation. It's about being better. We're all imperfect. I'm imperfect. Lord knows I'm imperfect. And so we need to not finger point. I find that when anything goes wrong, I'm as much to blame as the other person. I haven't communicated the right things. I didn't, I try to look for, I don't always, but I try to look for the things I can improve upon, or the things that I might be culpable in with respect to the situation. It goes on to talk about avoid yelling, cursing, name calling, putting down, or threats. And again, I think that gets back to the calming tone. When the cursing, the name calling, the putting down, the threats, it becomes this verbal arms race. If you're coming at somebody with those sorts of things, what do you expect? They're going to be defensive and shut down, or they're going to be aggressive and come back at you and meet your tone with their tone, and meet what you have to say with them. How do I know this? Man, I have made mistakes. I have, with my kids, with my spouse, with people, I've done this, and I try not to. I'm trying to improve, but from time to time, emotions get the best of me, and it never comes out the way you want it to come out. It doesn't ever solve anything, and I'm not saying I have a huge problem with it. I'm just saying I'm not perfect, and it's something I need to work on, and certainly everybody needs to be work on. The next thing talks about the fifth thing: be as clear as possible about your concerns and the things you'd like to change, or the things you'd like to address. What I find is that it can't be personal. The person isn't irresponsible. It was just irresponsible behavior. The person is not dishonest, but the action was somewhat dishonest. You really kind of need to talk to the situation and not to the person, because quite frankly, people are for the most part good people. They just, I don't even want to say do bad things. They don't consider the things that they're doing, and part of it's just part of their personality or their value system. I'm a planner. I like to have things planned out. I kind of like to know how my day is going to go, and how things should happen. And if that's not the situation, that's not the situation for other people. Some people just love to kind of just wing it, and things seem to work out for them, and so that's just how they are. But you need to be as clear as possible as to what the issues are. The next thing is don't interrupt. And that can always be a hard one, especially when you feel like you have something to say, to just kind of bite your tongue. I have a friend who admits, we first met, we were not first met, early on in our relationship, and I'm not going to rat him out. Early on in our relationship, he was always interrupting me. And at one point, I just got mad. I'm like, you always interrupt me. And he went quiet. And he said, you know what? I know I have a problem with that. It's a big problem, Frank. I know it's a big problem. And you can just let me know when I do it. I don't mean to do it. I just do it. And now we kind of joke about it, because he'll still do it. He'll still do it. And it's not something he consciously does. He just gets a thought in his head and he just goes. But the other thing I notice is that he's much, much better with it. And sometimes I'll have to say, are you still there? Are you still there? And he'll, yeah, I'm just listening. So he's much better at it. And so I just have to remind him of it. And I need to take that medicine myself. I just need to kind of stop, and I need to listen. And not just listen to what they're saying, but listen to really what they mean and really what's important. Next item, approach the conversation with openness and an interest in problem solving, not just being right. Um, and I think that's really where it comes down, because we all have a different perspective on things, and you know, being right and wrong in the end doesn't matter. It's just kind of solving what the issue is, and the issue might be totally different than what you thought it might be going in, and the reason why you're getting from them the things that are necessitating a difficult conversation might be something that you haven't even thought about. So you just need to be open to, okay, what's the issue here? Maybe it's something you haven't communicated or I haven't communicated. Maybe it's something I've communicated and it's just interpreted a whole different way, or maybe they said something that I totally missed. Um, the next thing is keep to the topic at hand. And I think that's a big thing. From time to time, when these difficult conversations ensue, it goes from one thing to the next. And the next thing you know, you're talking about something that's 10 years old that really has nothing to do with the situation. You need to kind of stick to the conversation. Certainly, if things in the past are indications or have created the current problem, you need to use those as evidence and okay, yeah, you're right. I can see how that's inconsistent with what we're talking about here. You know, what I'm trying to solve here, and addressing that. But just kind of going back to something that's totally unrelated. Hey, when we were at the state fair, you did this, or it's like, well, wait a minute, that's totally different conversation, totally separate. Um, don't walk away without the other person's agreement. Meaning have some sort of resolution to it. Now, it talks about in the article that it doesn't mean you can't have timeouts. Hey, you know what? This is getting kind of agitated. Can we just take a day and revisit this, or can we talk again in 45 minutes or whatever it might be? One of the things I always suggest is planning these meetings out, planning these conversations out, letting people know on the front end really what the conversation's about. And I ask that of people. People want to have conversations with me, and it's really important. I always ask them, yeah, I'm happy to have that conversation, but in fairness, can you let me know what the conversation's about so I can prepare? If I need to gather some facts, are we talking about zigging or are we talking about zagging? I think those, I need to know. And along the same lines, just saying, okay, wait a minute here. Really wasn't prepared for this. Mentally, I'm not prepared for it. I'm having a bad day or whatever it might be. Can we just take a time out and just step back so I can really kind of think through the big picture and really what's bothering me? Why is this? What's difficult about this? But at some point, coming away with an agreement that, and I'm going to, in the future, I'm going to communicate these things to you, or I'm going to communicate them in a better way, or when like my friend who always interrupted. We kind of had it when it came away with an agreement. When I interrupt, let me know. I want to be better. Let me know. And so I will. I do remind him from time to time, and he's much better. But we kind of walked away with an agreement. Take responsibility for feeling the way you do. Use I statements, as in I feel, rather than saying you make me so mad. I always tell people I can't control how they feel. Somebody once came at me and they said, I'm just not happy. I'm just not happy in the situation. And my response was, well, I can't control your happiness. I can't be responsible for your happiness. That's not my role. I can do X, Y, and Z. I can control certain things, but I can't control somebody's happiness. And if you allow that to happen, where you get caught up in making sure somebody's happy, it's a losing battle, because you could do all the wonderful things in the world and they could still come back at you and say, I'm not happy. Their happiness is their responsibility. Your responsibility is to try to do definitive things. In the end, whether they're happy or not, or how they feel, is not your responsibility. And it's the same thing with you. How you feel They're not making you mad. They're not making you sad. They're not making you unhappy. They're just doing certain things, and you need to just say, well, these things, I feel when these things happened. I feel I feel angry when you interrupt me. I just feel disrespected. And so it's what I feel. It's not them doing something. And then the last thing that it talks about in the article is drop your assumptions. People grow and change. Even if you've known someone for years, you don't necessarily know what that person is feeling or thinking. So, and I think that just comes down to these discussions, having a difficult conversation, being open to listening. People have changed. People have bad days. They come at things for certain reasons. There may have been something that happened recently that impacts how this situation has come to pass, how this need for a difficult conversation has come about. And you just need to be open to listening, because things do change. We go through all sorts of different things, and no 2 days are the same. Again, how to have a difficult conversation. It was in Psychology Today, the December 2020 issue, written by a guy by the name of Dan Mager, who's the executive director of the Vance Johnson Recovery Center, and he's the author of the book Some Assembly Required. Tomorrow we'll be releasing an interview with Alyssa Carpenter, who is the author of How to Listen and How to Be Heard, Inclusive Conversations at Work. And we're going to be talking about dealing with toxic people. Not necessarily difficult conversations, but people who are sort of toxic in their approach. To wrap up, just a reminder, we have a franchise opportunity through AmSpirit Business Connections, and we are looking to be connected to people who are entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals that seem to enjoy networking and seem to enjoy connecting with others, are open to helping others become more successful at it. Maybe they're in another organization. Maybe they're in a chamber. This is an opportunity to essentially learn about our program, become involved as a franchisee in AmSpirit Business Connections. If you know of somebody I should be talking to, they may not be the person, but there's somebody well connected, and they can connect me to somebody else, and that person can connect me to somebody else. That's how these things work. So if you know of such a person, email me or have them email me, or really the best thing to do is to email them and me on the same message, and that'll connect the two of us, and we can take it from there. You can pull yourself right out of the middle.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.